Welcome everyone. So my story begins when I was 12 and in the 7th grade. I was the blue-eyed boy of my teachers at school, the school topper who could do no wrong, whose answer scripts were the subject of animated discussions in staff rooms and school corridors. But this story is about my struggles in life and the lessons I drew from them. So my family was based in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, where I did my schooling. Those were the early 90s, and one of the major hubs of entertainment were social organizations or clubs, which perhaps also existed to foster a sense of oneness and belonging in an alien land. One such organization was the India Social Center, perhaps the largest in the UAE. Now, this was the place I regularly used to go to, either to hang out at the club canteen with my friends or pour over some light reading material in the reading room or to attend some sports coaching. After one such fun filled weekend, as I was preparing to return home, my dad asked me in the car, listen, there is this public speaking training course called the Toastmasters Forum happening in the conference hall on the first floor. It happens once in a fortnight. Why don't you attend it? I'm sure you'll find it useful. I looked at him quizzically and said, Dad, you can't be serious. I come here to have a good time, and you're asking me to attend some obscure training course? Don't even think about it. But dad sounded very persistent. Come on, after all, it's only 2 days a month. Why don't you give it a try? And this went on and on until I finally snapped back at him. Okay, dad, you do it first and I'll follow. Now, this statement of mine was entirely based on the assumption that dad wouldn't even try anything like this at his age. After all, he also went to the club to have a share of fun. So, why would he even try it? But to my utter surprise and dismay, dad said, okay, I'll attend. And he actually began to attend these proceedings and what's more, take active part in these proceedings. So now I had no choice. I had given my word. Reluctantly, at first, I began to attend these meetings. Now, for those who are not familiar with the structure of the Toastmasters Forum, it's a series of speech projects where you get evaluated on one target area or target skill per project, and then after evaluation on that particular skill, you're allowed to move forward to the next project. Over the course of the next 3 years, I was a regular and I dare say a reasonably successful participant, and I went until my sixth project. And what's more, I even began to enjoy it. So here I learned my first lesson in life. Never say no to a new responsibility right at the outset. Around this time, there was also another significant development in my life. Now, within our family circle, we had a few friends who were doctors. And one recurring theme I used to regularly hear from their conversations were the long working hours of medical professionals and the poor quality of life of doctors in the UAE. Now, there were some local factors at play here which I do not intend to discuss. But suffice to say that I was intrigued by their conversations. Sufficiently intrigued enough to consider medicine as a career. And anyway, I was up for new challenges after my Toastmasters avatar. Around the same time, my biology teacher in the 8th grade mentioned the word JIPMER to me. So now it became a dream to study medicine in one of the elite medical schools in India. I made up my mind to do medicine. Now there was no looking back. I began to actively seek out and talk to people who had been successful in cracking the medical entrance exam. Pretty soon, I figured out that my best chance of success lay in coming back to India after my 10th and pursuing coaching for medicine. Of course, the other option I had was to stay back in the UAE after my 10th and do my +2 there, and then attend the 1 month crash course before the medical entrance exam. But success stories from that approach were very limited. So now the time had come to take charge of my own destiny and take a momentous decision. I went up to my dad and said, Dad, I want to relocate to India after my 10th and pursue coaching for medicine. It was a disruptive idea because the subsequent few weeks entailed long discussions between my parents, mainly because there was no way they were sending me to India alone, although I would have gone anyway. It was decided that mom would accompany me. And because my mom would accompany me, my sister, who was in the 7th grade, would also have to be transplanted to India to do the rest of her schooling there. And thus we made the decision to relocate to India. And till today, my sister has not forgiven me for displacing her against her will from her dreamland. Anyhow, I landed in India and enrolled myself in the most happening medical entrance coaching center in Kerala. The initial few weeks were literally a trial by fire for me because there were a lot of cultural differences in the teacher student dynamics and interaction between the Middle East and India. Initially, I put on a brave face, but after a few skirmishes with my teachers, mostly on non academic issues, I even had thoughts about quitting the program altogether. It was a pretty brutal schedule, too. 2 hours of coaching in the morning, then regular college hours till about 4 or 5 in the evening, then another 2 hours of coaching, and then back home with lots to prepare. Although I initially could not put up with it, I was egged on in part by my family and the regular cold stares that my sister used to give me, which reminded me of the reason why I relocated in the first place. I decided that I would stay the course and give it my best shot. I appeared for the medical entrance exam, and when the results were announced, I had managed to secure the coveted medical seat in JIPMER. So that was my lesson number 2. No half measures. Put your heart and mind totally into what you want to do and achieve. Fast forward, medical school, we graduated from boys to men, learned a lot not only about medicine but also about life. Met a lot of interesting and colorful personalities and their way of connecting with life and situations in general. Little did I know then that I would be taking up psychiatry as a career. I always had a reasonably good attention span, though the only person who probably disagrees with this is my wife. And I always enjoyed talking to people about their pursuits. Slowly, psychiatry beckoned, and I followed. I joined for my post-graduation in 2005. It was a lot of fun initially exploring the human mind. But perhaps the biggest positive for me was that I got to know myself better as a person, my own strengths and weaknesses, and in general, channel my impulses more efficiently. But then tragedy struck. My professor, who was the single faculty in the department then, left his job. Just like that, one fine day. I'm sure he must have had his own reasons for doing so, but it left us postgraduate residents high and dry. We were rudderless. An acting head of the department was promptly appointed, and because there were no other regular consultants, the next in line senior residents were promoted to acting consultants, and we, the junior resident trainees, had to act as senior residents. Pretty soon, we were labeled the acting department and became the butt of jokes in the hospital. But the worst was still to come, facing all 4 external examiners in the final year postgraduate exam. Now, facing the final year postgraduate exam as a single resident itself was bad enough because there was no one to share your woes with. But facing all 4 externals had a feeling of throw me to the wolves written all over it. I couldn't even share this with my family because they were sitting miles away and they couldn't do anything about it. So why bother them anyway? That was my line of thinking. So that's when I found refuge in fatalistic coping and sayings like do your best and leave the rest. All these things gave me a renewed sense of hope and purpose. Come what may, I decided that I would face the exam and give it my best. The big day came, the day of the exam, and when the results were announced, marks and grades be damned. This was a question of survival, and I had managed to survive the exam. So that was my lesson number 3. Never quit. There is always light at the end of the tunnel. I then joined for my senior residency, which is a tenure post for 3 years after you finish your postgraduate residency. And the first couple of years were literally the best time of my life. Of course, there was a heavy workload given the lack of manpower in the department, but we found enough time to explore our other passions in life. The next big challenge for me came as I was finishing my senior residency and looking for faculty positions to settle down. There was one post of assistant professor of psychiatry vacant in JIPMER. I applied for it. 8 candidates, including myself, were shortlisted for the interview. And on the day of the interview, my interview got over in 15 minutes. They said it was pretty short by the usual standards and it could cut both ways. I kept my fingers crossed. When the results were announced, I had managed to get selected as assistant professor of psychiatry. It was a sublime feeling coming back to the same institute where you had trained and now becoming colleagues with your former professors and teachers. But if I had any notion that my JIPMER job would be a quiet little typical government job with lots of free time, I was wrong, and wrong big time. The next big challenge and transformation for me happened roughly a year after I joined JIPMER. But before I tell you about that, I have to give you a bit of background and context. So there was this lovely little center of excellence in JIPMER called the National Teacher Training Center. It was and is responsible for running one of the flagship programs of JIPMER, the National Teacher Training Course, which is a biannual course on educational science for teachers of health professionals from all over the country. The waiting list for this course was pretty long, and therefore the completion of this course was worn like a badge of honor among its attendees. But for JIPMER insiders like me, there was another reason why this course held so much of aura. The resource faculty at NTTC comprised of some of our brightest and most revered professors. Merely listening to their classes provided oneself a rarely matched cerebral experience. One of my professors goaded me to attend this training program roughly about 6 months after I joined JIPMER. And attending that course was a transformative experience for me. My outlook towards teaching changed. My lectures became more interactive, less didactic, and I began to innovate with a lot of new teaching learning methods. All very goody-goody and rosy until now. About 6 months after I had attended this training program, that's about roughly a year after I joined JIPMER, one day as I was ambling across to the canteen for a quick bite, one of my professors, Dr. Gitanjali, who was a professor in the Department of Pharmacology and also heading the Department of Medical Education then, stopped me on the way and said in her usual direct manner, "Vikas, we are looking to induct some fresh faces into the NTTC core group. Why don't you join us?" For a second I stood transfixed, but then I blurted out, "Thank you, madam, but I do not think I have the skills for it." I mean, I couldn't possibly do this. I couldn't end up sabotaging the very program and faculty that I had grown up idolizing. With a dismissive wave of her hand, madam said, "Don't you worry about that. Just attend the first course as a spectator, and I'm sure you'll pick up the skills." Well, I wasn't half as sure as she sounded to be. But then I guess I remembered my lesson number 1. Never say no to a new responsibility. I gamely said, "Okay, madam, I'll give it a try." The first course I attended as a spectator, and in the immediate next course, I took my first full independent session. And then, just as I was thinking that I could settle down into taking the same session for the foreseeable future, I was asked to take a different session in the next course. And that was one of the recurring themes of this workshop, that nobody does the same session, at least in the same manner, twice in a row. There are always tweaks and changes made, and that's part of the evolution of the course. Today, when I look back, I kept on making changes to the sessions I handled, and I've been able to put my distinctive stamp on it. But more importantly, this experience taught me what is my lesson number 4. That is, you don't improve by doing the same thing repeatedly. The 10,000 hours rule in Malcolm Gladwell's Outlier says, put in 10,000 hours of practice and you will become an expert. Based on my experience, I would like to modify that rule slightly and put it this way. Put in 10,000 hours of work that constantly pushes your skill sets and you will become an expert in what you do. This was a very important lesson for me that paid me handsome dividends in other areas of my work as well. I also very quickly realized that in order to achieve 10,000 hours of work that involves new skill sets, I might have to look around for new challenges and opportunities. Or in other words, seek out work. So there were many aspects of my job description in JIPMER which was very challenging to me when I joined. Medical research was one such challenge. Now, I was pretty much a novice at research when I joined JIPMER as faculty. And I very quickly realized that I could not stay that way if I wanted to leave a mark in my field. So initially, I began to voluntarily attend research methodology workshops. I sought out people whom I felt could answer my queries, and I kept on asking questions till I got convincing answers. Sometimes I would even ask the same question to two different people because different people had different ways of explaining the same concepts that I felt could enhance my understanding. I sought out people whom I felt could mentor me. I volunteered for manuscript writing responsibilities. Every little opportunity that came my way in terms of training, networking, presenting, and writing were utilized. I did not succeed every time. Not everyone was ready to help me all the time. I learnt more from my numerous failures than from my occasional successes. But most importantly, I kept on improving with every extra effort that I put in. So, friends, excellence is a passion and something that you have to pursue and take charge of your own destiny and pursue with a single minded focus. It is the effort you put in that makes the outcome worthwhile, without which the outcome wouldn't be half as sweet. Virat Kohli often says, excellence is an obsession. I couldn't agree with him more. So, my message for all of you is have a dream, take charge of your own destiny, and equip yourself with the best possible tools to achieve it. Strive hard and push yourself constantly as you keep working towards your dream. The journey continues for me. Thank you for your attention.